Okay, friends, 1904, the visionary dies. The vision does not die, but we all know what happens when a movement is led by one person, so-called first generation or first in early years, and then how it will develop and mature. So I'm going to introduce you briefly to another person of extraordinary abilities. And I think that's what anybody would say about him, whether they agree with him or they oppose him, and some would vigorously. But a brilliant person. So you're looking at here a picture of the man Chaim Weizmann, or Weitzman, right over here. Every time I think about him or start to talk about him, I just want to kind of shrink. And the reason is, we all admire somebody who can be a brilliant and successful, say, in one thing. That's extraordinary. Here is somebody who was a world-class scientist and a world-class diplomat. So I'm just saying, and I'll say this personally, some things about him I really don't like politically, but an absolutely brilliant and accomplished person, and that needs to be said about him. So he was a Russian Jew, spoke German and Russian at home, excelled in science in the academy as a child, went on to university. He got a doctorate. He was a full professor running a huge laboratory in his mid-20s. And he was also a very committed and practicing Jew. So I'd love to tell you more about him, but let me just do this quickly. He moved to Britain in 1904. Note the date. Now that Herzl has died, some things need to develop. He decided, because he was firmly committed to the WZO and a Jewish homeland and so forth, that his best investment on that score, quite apart from the fact that he was a successful scientist, would be in Great Britain. A choice with immense ramifications. I think I could put it that way. So he goes there in 1904. Just as an aside, one of his research projects had to do with a formula that made gunpowder more efficient. Well, the British were very interested in this, and he got a very lucrative contract to make gunpowder, I don't know what I'm talking about, other than that's what I read, make gunpowder more efficient. And he had a formula that went with that. So he made a lot of money and a lot of friends doing that. So note the date here, friends. 1917, he became the president of a local chapter of the WZO, and that local chapter was called the British Zionist Federation. That would be a group of Jews who live in Great Britain, who wanted to have membership in that, and so forth. And in 1921, he was elected to be the president of the WZO. He was 15 years younger than Herzl. And Herzl dies at 44. He's going to live to his mid-70s. And if you'll skip down for the moment to the last bullet point, he will be elected as the first president of the modern state of Israel. Not the prime minister, but the president, which is an honorary or honorific appointment. He was not in good health, but he was widely recognized for his contributions, and thus he was the natural choice to be the first president. I'll show you a picture of the Declaration of Independence in a few moments. So, friends, that third bullet point. In 1917, the British government made public its official support. I should have underlined that, put it in caps or whatever. its official support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And it's known throughout all the literature as the Balfour Declaration because it was issued in the name of the government by the colonial secretary, A.J. Balfour, often called Lord Balfour because he's from the aristocratic parts, the peerage, etc., House of Lords. Excuse me. So I'm going to give you some quotations from Balfour and his thinking, and we'll take our time and look at those. And I'll also show you the actual Balfour Declaration. Let's set this in a larger context very, very quickly. Number one, World War I is up and going, right, in 1917. Right, friends? Well, in November of 17, General Allenby and British expeditionary forces had moved out of Egypt, where they'd been headquartered, and they moved across the northern Sinai, and they fought the Ottoman forces who were established there in the Middle East, and they had a battle at a place that some of you will know, Gaza. Some things are just always in the news. And when the Battle of Gaza went in favor of the British forces and they retreated, then Allenby and then Lawrence of Arabia from the other side with Arab troops came marching north. So Jerusalem fell in November of 1917 to the British. So the war is underway. Great Britain needs friends. It needs resources. This discussion had been bandied about for quite some time, and so the government chose to release this statement in November of 1917. It had been endlessly discussed. You know, it's one of those things where you do drafts. There were probably 100 drafts of the statement. It ends up being 67 words. And I'm going to show it to you. The reason I'm staying on this slide for the moment is that Weizmann was the indispensable Jewish connection to the British government. He had all of the abilities. He had the confidence of the WZO. He was a person of integrity. He had the confidence of his relationship with the British government. So they asked him, to whom should we send our announcement? This is what we want to do. And he said, well, you should send it to the British Zionist Foundation or Association. He happened to be the president of that. But, now this is his genius. He said, but don't send it to me. The best known, I hate to put it this way, friends, the best known Jewish person, best known Jew in England was the elder Rothschild of the banking family. So the official notice of the British intention was sent to, it says, Dear Lord Rothschild. Isn't that something? Okay, here is a picture of A.J. Balfour. You'll see it on a couple of the slides coming. He was the British Foreign Secretary. I believe this was his actual title. He was also a colonial secretary at one time. He was a prime minister at one time. You know how they have these rotating things in a parliamentary system? He is the one who sends the announcement supporting, and here's the quotation, a national home. Didn't say state. Got to parse these things carefully, saints. A national home for Jews in Palestine. So Weizmann had developed good relations with Prime Minister David Lloyd George and also with Balfour. Both of them were personally supportive of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And so they consulted him on when to send it, to whom. They exchanged back channels. Is this the wording that we want? Do you like this? Will this be acceptable? And so forth. Okay, here it is, and you can't read all of it, I realize. There's a copy of it right there. So it begins, Dear Lord Rothschild, and let me see, get up close, I can read a couple of lines to you, and then it's the middle paragraph, it's the actual declaration, and I'll show that to you in just a moment. It says, Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with the Jewish Zionist aspirations. Which has been submitted, I can hardly read that, and approved by the cabinet. Then there's the actual statement, and then the last line is this. I would be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours, A.J. Balfour. Here is the actual declaration itself. We don't want to be in a hurry. Let's look at it. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. Let's start with that last point. You see, it's not assumed that it will change the political status of Jewish people anywhere else. I mean, it would be their choice should they wish to involve themselves in this endeavor. So, make that point. The term national home was endlessly debated because it does not assume a political state. It means a place where one can call their home that could have at least some kind of autonomy, but it would not have to be a formal state. It would become one, but that's not part of the statement here. And then, of course, the really difficult issue, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which would prejudice the civil and religious rights of people, I'll just put it this way, who already live in Palestine. All right, let's skip ahead for a moment. This is the commitment of the British government. There is a war to successfully prosecute. And the assumption is, at this point, they're going to win. So what is going to happen to those who lose the war? Remember that the Ottoman Empire, which had controlled much of the Middle East for centuries, fought on the side of the Germans. And when they lose, their control over much of their holdings is going to be taken away by the victors. What's the proverb? To the victors, the spoils. So already in 1917, and this is another discussion, the British and the French are already trying to figure out how we're going to divide up the spoils. So you have this statement. It's designed to say to Jewish people, please be on our side as we prosecute the war, because the Germans all of a sudden were interested in Jews and wanted them to support them in the fight. Even the Ottoman Empire said, we might be nicer to you if you'll support our side. So it's revenue, political support, etc. So that's the context. 67, I think it's 67 words. Quite a political statement. Okay, so what is called the Balfour Declaration, a formal statement of the government when the war concludes. Remember, there was the great gathering. It was called the Paris Peace Conference, held at Versailles, where massive changes in the modern world. New nations are created, are changed, and so forth. The Balfour Declaration was officially approved as a goal for the future in the Paris Peace Accords. So you can see why I gave a short answer yesterday. Would there perhaps have been a Jewish national home or a state apart from the Holocaust? See, the building blocks are already here. Okay, you may recall the League of Nations, one of the great dreams of Woodrow Wilson, to whom I'm coming in just a moment. The League of Nations was formed out of that conference of the nations at the Paris Peace Conference. That Paris Peace Conference went on for months in 1919. And so the League of Nations will assign Great Britain a mandate. I gave the uppercase M there, just kind of emphasize it. It had a mandate from the new League of Nations to govern Palestine for an undetermined interim period until something would come along for a modern state. More broadly, and this again, we'll just say it and we'll go on, the British and the French had administrative control in various ways over almost all of the Middle East at this point. So, the British Army had walked into Jerusalem without firing a shot and taken over. They kept going all the way to Damascus. And so the British Armed Forces had occupied what we would call today, to use modern terms, Israel, Jordan, the West Bank, Lebanon, parts of Syria, and so forth. They had occupied it militarily before the war had ended. And when the war ended, that administration was just in place. So it was a military administration of a large area. And the French got into it as well. But what we would call today Israel and Jordan was given, assigned, shall I say, to Great Britain. So from the Balfour Declaration to the Paris Peace Accords to the League of Nations, it's going to take 2 or 3 years to get all of that in legalese, but it's now all in place. Okay, how about Woodrow Wilson? Wilson was lobbied heavily to support the Balfour Declaration. That won't surprise you. His friends in Europe said, you should support this. He did so. You may recall that one of his best-known movements was outlined in a speech, his so-called 14-point speech. Please nod your head, many of you will know that. And one of the hallmarks of his view was that, particularly when the war comes to an end, we should work on peace and self-determination of peoples and so forth. So there was a bit of tension with the Balfour Declaration that decisions would be made about portions of land where they already had inhabitants, which would now be under new administration, if I could put it that straightforwardly. So he did end up supporting it. Wilson had very good relations with American Jewish communities. And he was, for example, the person who appointed the first Jewish member of the Supreme Court. Louis Brandeis, Chris, you, some other people who are lawyers, he was a very influential, famous person, I believe. They were good friends. Rabbi Stephen Wise, who gives a quotation there in that second bullet point, was also a very good friend of Wilson's. And so in his autobiography, that's what I'm quoting is his autobiography. By that I mean Stephen Wise's autobiography. In his conversations with Wilson said this to him. You'll see this quote bandied about, where Wilson says, "To think that I, the son of the man," so remember his father was a Presbyterian minister, should be able to help restore the Holy Land to its people. I'll tell you something about his personal view. In a speech that he gave, not to Congress, but it was on the stump somewhere. And remember, not long after the end of the war, he was felled, had terrible medical issues. I think it was a stroke. And so he was incapacitated in many ways, even though he remained the President of the United States. But he gave this quotation right there, which simply says that, and again, can you read it? It says, "The Allied nations with the fullest concurrence of our government and people, are agreed that in Palestine shall be laid the foundations of a Jewish commonwealth. So he chose that term rather than homeland. Didn't use the term state, but commonwealth is getting pretty close, isn't it? Okay, friends, doing okay on time here. Let's go. I want to spend a little bit of time on two extended quotations from Balfour. And let me kind of frame it for you this way. I could summarize his views, but I think it's better when you're talking about really epoch-making and sensitive issues. Let's just hear it from the horse's mouth. And what I think Balfour's two quotes, I got this one and one coming up, do, that they kind of set out the issues that we're all still dealing with. He doesn't foresee everything, but the way he puts things, and whether you agree or not, helps us see modern circumstances today. So this is a letter that he wrote to the Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, and the date is February the 19th, which means that the conference in Paris is underway, where they're making all these momentous decisions. We have enough time. Let's just read it, and don't take my interpretation. Let's just read it. Okay? The weak point of our position, of course, is that in the case of Palestine, we deliberately and rightly decline to accept the principle of self-determination. If the present inhabitants were consulted, they would unquestionably give an anti-Jewish verdict. Our justification for our policy is that we regard Palestine as being absolutely exceptional. That we consider the question of the Jews outside Palestine as one of world importance, and that we conceive the Jews to have a historic claim to a home in their ancient land, provided that home can be given them without either dispossessing or oppressing the present inhabitants. That sets up all the difficulties and dynamics right there, doesn't it, friends? You've got to have a nod of the head. I'm not asking for agreement, I think it sets up the issues straightforwardly. That's the letter in 19. Later, as the conference is coming to an end, the British Foreign Secretary was a man by the name of Lord Curzon. And he was the one who said, I just don't think we have thought enough about what this will mean to people who already live there when we make this commitment as a government. So here's Balfour kind of restating a couple of things in a letter to Curzon. Everybody with me? In Palestine, we do not propose even to go through the form of consulting the wishes of the present inhabitants. The four great powers, he puts Italy in there. I'm smiling. The four great powers are committed to Zionism. And Zionism, be it right or wrong, good or bad, is rooted in age-long traditions, in present needs. That's one I'd love to have him say more about. And future hopes of far profounder import than the desires and prejudices of the 700,000 Arabs who now inhabit that ancient land. In my opinion, that is right. Friends, the current difficulties and tensions that we see today are right there, are they not? I'm not asking for agreement, show of hands, just it sets things out. I want to start with that first line. In Palestine, we do not propose even to go through the form of consulting the wishes of the present inhabitants. A little known fact, and I regard it as significant, speaking personally. Woodrow Wilson also said, well, don't you think we should ask people there what they think about this? And you can see what Balfour thought of that. So what are they going to do? You have to appease Wilson. So France and Great Britain said, well, would you like to organize a fact-finding mission? And Wilson said, well, in fact, I would. And he put together what was called the King-Crane Commission. Two people, remember, Wilson was an academic. He got two academics to run this. He said, you know the history. And he sent them. They made stops over about a 6-week period. It was the first poll taking ever in the region. I'm absolutely serious about that description. They went to Jerusalem, they went to Beirut, they went to Damascus, and they would have a town hall meeting, and they would ask the people, what do you think about the changes that are coming now that the European powers are going to administrate things for a while? What would you like? And they took copious notes about this, and they brought it back. Then Wilson has failed with his stroke. His dream of the League of Nations, the Senate squashed that, you may know. The United States Senate said, we're not going to become part of the League of Nations. It might hamper our independence. We're not going to get involved in that. The isolationist wing was very, very strong. So all of the data was put in a file and stuck in a cabinet. The British and the French didn't want to discuss it. People were worried about other things. It never got any traction at all. I will say this to you, and I realize most of you are not going to run out and run a Google and get the data this afternoon. That's okay. It is actually interesting reading. I'll just give you one comment out of this. I've mulled over for some time now. So they would ask the local people, what do you think about the fact that Western powers are going to administrate things for a while, and they had, as you might imagine, a variety of opinions. But one that came out in more than once, it was not that common, more than once, people would say, we realize that the Europeans are going to run things. But you know, they have a long history of colonialism. Perhaps the United States could run things for a while. You're less colonial. I'll just leave it at that. All right, so what happened? The British civil administration began in 1921. The League of Nations is almost completely official now, and it will make the mandate to administer the region official in July 1922. Of course, they've been doing it now for a few years. It's a civil administration, and it's official. It has the imprimatur of the League of Nations. So in 1948, I'm skipping ahead of all kinds of important things. In 1948, after 30 years of difficulties, that is a massive understatement. But I'm trying to be even-handed. Let's just call them difficulties. Between Jewish and Arab inhabitants, the British allowed for broad Jewish immigration to the region, but eventually could not do enough to satisfy many of the Jewish people who lived there. The Arabs were unhappy. They were not satisfied by the treatment that they got from the British. It got worse and worse and worse. There were riots. Nobody could be appeased. There were all kinds of studies in the 30s, various proposals from European powers and so forth. We have 2 states. We have 2 of this, 2 of that. I mean, it's a massive history to all of this. Let's just go back, let's go to the end. Second bullet point, friends, are you with me? In 1948, after 30 years of difficulties between the inhabitants, Great Britain ended its mandate. It had fought a Second World War. Everybody's tired. Everybody's frustrated. Everybody's broke. They ended the mandate for Palestine. So on May the 14th, 1948, Jewish inhabitants declared a modern state of Israel. The next day, as they say in my beloved North Carolina, they got to fighting. War broke out on May the 15th, 1948. All right, the Declaration of Independence May the 14th, 1948. I'm just a little parenthetical comment, if I may, friends. I sure have enjoyed reading these learned comments that people have made on social media and articles and so forth on our 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. You know, the last couple of weeks, I have loved, how about you? I've just loved reading people's insights in the past and influence and so forth. So this is the Declaration of Independence, which was modeled on ours. It was issued on May the 14th. And there's a quotation in it, Theodor Herzl, now we're back to Herzl, and I'm going to conclude, is the only person mentioned by name in the Israeli Declaration of Independence. So they use a traditional Jewish calendar there. It says in the year 5657, which is 1897, the way we measure our calendar, at the summons of the spiritual father of the Jewish state, Theodor Herzl, the First Zionist Congress convened and proclaimed the right of the Jewish people to national rebirth in its own country. One person name. It was done in Tel Aviv. Jerusalem was too dangerous. So the actual reading of the Declaration, that's David Ben Gurion there. You can't see it very well, but I'll point him out to you. Sitting right there is Chaim Weizmann. In his late 70s, in bad health, a dream come true for him. And he would then be later elected as the first honorary president. What I wanted you to see, of course, is what's above the seated people. The banners. And Theodor Herzl. What was his line? If you dream it. Herzl was buried in Austria in the family plot where his father and sister were interred. According to his obituary in the Times, his will is quoted, "I wish to be buried in the vault beside my father, and to lie there till the Jewish people shall take my remains to Israel." I got to say, I wonder about that quote. Israel is not a term that he used, but I can't go against the Times. His remains and those of his parents and sister were brought to West Jerusalem in 1949. And they were interred on Mount Herzl. How about that for a name? Which is right there in the center of the National Cemetery. We have Arlington Cemetery. They have a national cemetery. In the center of it is this crypt. You won't be able to see it, friends, very easily, but it says Herzl in Hebrew right there. Some other family members were brought decades later there to the cemetery. So on the day that happened, August the 17th, 1949, Ben Gurion made these comments afterward. Herzl is immortal. His tombstone is the state of Israel, which will be built and will grow in love with its sons and builders. Herzl's reburial ceremony in Jerusalem was not a procession of mourning, but a journey of victory, the triumph of the vision that became reality. So, where we were yesterday, his conclusion in 1896. I believe that a wondrous generation of Jews will spring into existence. The Maccabees will rise again. That's a reference to a Jewish renewal group from over 2,000 years ago. Let me repeat once more my opening words. The Jews who wish for a state will have it. This is a hard one for me to read. We shall live at last as free men on our own soil and die peacefully in our own homes. I got to say, I wish that for anybody. Anybody. On my soil and my house, I swear I'm going to die. The world will be freed by our liberty, enriched by our wealth, and magnified by our greatness. Now that's a vision, is it not? Whatever we attempt there to accomplish for our own welfare will react powerfully and beneficially for the good of humanity. 1896. Thank you, friends. Nice meeting this morning. We have a couple of minutes, as I always say, comments, corrections, or questions. If you'd like to ask them, if not, go in peace. Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, Andy, I have a question. Obviously, Herzl was such a great visionary, as you pointed out. But you made a comment earlier that it wasn't a religious calling.
For him, yes.
For him.
Correct.
And I'd like to elaborate on that because, I mean, it seemed like it would be partially that. I know Judaism is a little complicated because it's religious and cultural and nationalistic and all that, but maybe you can elaborate on that.
Thank you. I will try. It's one of the great debates in the history of this issue, his own personal views. He went to synagogue as a boy. He had a bar mitzvah. I think the best way to describe him was that he was literally religiously indifferent. And he was not observant in terms of many of his practices. There are people who think that he was philosophically an atheist. I think it was just, he didn't care. He was maybe an agnostic. What drove him, and it's part of the way you asked the question, he was driven by what he called the Jewish spirit. So he was not observant. One of the observant people early on in his attempt to contact people came by his house to see him, and he was lighting a Christmas tree. He being a Herzl. This was an Orthodox Jew. I'm not going to tell you what he said in church. It was like, what the are you doing? So a number of your early Zionists were Jewish in culture and spirit, but were, to use that phrase, religiously indifferent. And I'm not sure if there's a better one to describe him. There's something to be said in terms of historical analysis to have somebody like that trying to lead a new movement, because he was not opposed to Jewish practice, observant practice. He just didn't do it himself. I mean, you're not going to find him in a synagogue on Friday night. But he didn't mind if somebody else went. Yeah, and I think Tom has one too. Yeah, please.
First of all, Andy, thank you so much for these lectures. They've been wonderful. I was struck in that last slide when Herzl was talking about the establishment of the state, or future establishment of the state of Israel. He saw it, at least in the last two bullet points, as an enrichment of all humanity.
Yes.
He talks about not just sort of a nationalistic pride that we're doing this, and no doubt that was part of it, but an enrichment of the human enterprise, if you will. And I just wonder, that struck me as remarkable.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. Help me maybe make another comment, go along with George's question. There's a sense in which Herzl was a secular evangelist. He loved the Jewish spirit. He did believe that a Jewish homeland would rebound to the betterment of the whole world. Weizmann had some of that. He believed that the Jewish homeland and state should become a paragon of scientific research. He said one of the gifts that we as the Jewish community have to offer is science. So in 1950, he's still alive. You know, he's he being Weitzman, the honorary president of the state. American Jews gave several $1 million to establish the Weitzman Institute of Science, still going today in the modern state of Israel. So Weitzman and Herzl shared this idea. It's a kind of secular messianism, if you could put it that way, that the hard work of our community will redound to the benefit of the world. They actually believe that. And thank you for raising that.
Just to follow up on that, in that last, with this question, and with putting the world together and their statement, you didn't make the connection, and I'm curious if there is one, back to through you, Abraham, and through you, all the peoples of the world will be blessed, that idea. And is that would be maybe not necessarily faith, but it could be they had that genetically almost.
Yeah, there are, thank you, there are various forms from, shall I put it, a Jewish point of view of what that programmatic statement in Genesis chapter 12 that you referred to, that you shall be a blessing to all the nations of the earth. And like again to Tom's question, a secular or broad cultural version of that may well be behind Herzl's thoughts. What drove Herzl, I'll come at it one more time, was the belief that in Judaism, very broadly defined, but definitely defined as Judaism, was a key for the betterment of all of humanity. He believed that to his core, even though he didn't go to synagogue. He still thought that was part of a dream. If you want to call it a mission, I think he would agree with that too. All right. Thank you, friends.
Thanks, Andy.
Yep.
We appreciate it.
Yep.